Hi, good afternoon and good morning to those viewers coming in from across the globe. Before I introduce our fascinating speaker today, here are a few housekeeping notes. The session is going to be recorded and we'll send this around to all those who've registered. If you have any questions, please pop them into the question box on the dashboard to your right, and we'll try to get through all the questions during the allocated time. We have a few webinars coming up, the next one being part of our China 101 series on June the 1st. If you're considering any market entry into China, please sign up for this. We do have a schedule of webinars on our website under the webinar section, so please check that. Otherwise, we'll also send the registration link through with the recording of this webinar. So now on to this exciting stuff. I'm delighted today to introduce you all to Rob May, who's the founder and managing director of Ramsack, who deliver IT and cybersecurity services support and have been doing so for 29 years with a team of 75 consultants working for him. I first met Rob when he was brought into the Sovereign Group to run internal training for all staff across the group. He stressed that this is not just an IT issue, but rather something every single one of us needs to be aware of, as we are all exposed to these risks. Rob is the UK ambassador for cybersecurity for the Institute of Directors and is ranked number 5 in the global rankings for cybersecurity thought leaders and influencers. Analytica ranked him in their top 10 global cybersecurity keynote speakers for 2020, and his cybersecurity TED Talk has had nearly 500,000 views. He's a published author and makes this complex yet vital subject fun, entertaining, actionable, and relevant. So on that note, Rob, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany. And good afternoon and good morning to everybody. Cyber security is an amazing, fascinating subject, and it's one that I could talk about for a very long time. But it's essential that we have ongoing cybersecurity education. In fact, it's mandated by law in many regions, and how we learn is fascinating, and we all learn differently. And today is one of those experiences. But when you do cybersecurity training of any form, and when you do this within your organizations, it's really important that you record who's had what training and when, because again, in different regions, you need to have proof, you need to have an audit trail of who and when has had cyber training. Because, I mean, for a start, cybersecurity education is an inherent part of GDPR. And in other laws in other countries as well. But if I take GDPR as an example, when you report a data breach, the fourth question that gets asked is the person that was involved in the data breach, what was the date of their last training? So it's really, really important. And if you like, it's like health and safety law, but it's health and safety law for data. And most organizations are more likely to be fined because of a data incident. And remember, with data, it's not necessarily just cybercrime. You know, it could be a loss of data, and a loss of data could simply be a member of staff losing a laptop or a mobile phone if it's got client data on it. But I think that cybersecurity training is unique in as much as it's as much about protecting you and your loved ones, the people that you live with, you know, your children, your parents. It's as much about protecting them as it is about protecting the organization. And I often get asked, why do cyber criminals do what they do? And look, there isn't a one size fits all answer to this. There's lots of reasons. Sometimes it's financial, but again, if I look at the range of cases that I've been involved with, those financial amounts can vary dramatically. I've known people who have been ransomed for a couple of £100, and it was probably, you know, school children. They call them script kiddies in the cyber world. It was probably school children doing that, and for them a couple of £100 is a lot of money. Equally, I was working with a client in the Silicon Valley in the States, and their ransom was 7 digits. Absolutely huge. So sometimes it is financial. It can be revenge driven, and revenge can be that might be a disgruntled customer. It could be a disgruntled member of staff or a disgruntled former member of staff. We see a lot of political cyber attacks or geopolitical cyber attacks. And sometimes it's about significance. And actually, if you look at the psychology of crime, a lot of crime is about significance. If somebody is feeling that nobody takes them seriously and they're worthless and so on, if all of a sudden you put a gun in their hand or a knife in their hand, for that time that they're committing their crime, they feel significant. People are taking them seriously for the wrong reasons, obviously, but they're being taken seriously. And so it is with cybercrime. There was a notorious crime in the UK, cyber attack. It was the TalkTalk attack, mobile phone company, and it was notorious at the time because it was the biggest fine that had ever been received in the UK. Well, it turned out that it was a schoolboy that did the attack. It was actually four schoolboys, a 16-year-old, a 15-year-old, and two 14-year-olds. And I read an interview with the 16-year-old, who's now in his 20s, and he said the reason he did it was because he wanted to go to college to study IT, and he needed a certain level of qualifications from his school exams, and he didn't get them, and therefore the college wouldn't let him in. And he knew that he was really good at IT, he just wasn't good at conventional examinations. So he decided to breach TalkTalk to show people how good he was. And of course, the rest is history. Some people do it just because they can, or they see it as a challenge. And that might be hard to comprehend, but in the same way, if you think, if you're a mountain climber and you see Kilimanjaro, you might see that as a real challenge and think, I'm going to climb Kili or Everest or whatever it happens to be. If mountain climbing is not in your world, you can't imagine even contemplating doing that. And we get a certain amount of that with cyber as well. And then the final category of why people do it is foolishness or just general muppetry. The thing that we need to be acutely aware of is that it's human behavior. It's my behavior, it's your behavior, it's the behavior of your staff, it's the behavior of your family that is both the biggest risk and also the greatest line of defense when it comes to cybersecurity. And it's what we call the human firewall. And you are part of the human firewall in your digital life, whether that's at work or at home. And a lot of cybercrime starts with social engineering. Social engineering is the art of manipulating people so that they give up confidential information without thinking about it. In essence, it's sometimes people say, well, you know, you're just being tricked, but there's a real element of social engineers where they're trying to fulfill all the social cues that are needed in order for you to feel relaxed and trust the person and give the answers that they want. And as I say, it's quite often confidential information or credit card details or whatever. And there are 4 social engineering vectors. And the 4 are impersonation. So you get quite a lot of attack where people are literally physically going to an organization and they're pretending to be somebody that they're not. They're disguised. They're disguised as, you know, an office cleaner or a you know, waste services or whatever it is, but they're watching an organization and they're seeing what sort of services are engaged in that business, and then how are they dressed and so on, and using it to get into the building. So there's impersonation, there's phishing, which is email based, there's smishing, which is text based, and there's vishing, which is voice based. So impersonation, phishing, smishing, and vishing. So let's start with vishing. So vishing is voice solicitation. And this example that I'm going to share with you happened to one of my clients, and the lady on reception at this business received a phone call one morning, and the person on the phone said, good morning, we're phoning up and we're asking a series of questions, and if you can answer 3 questions, then you win a magnum of champagne. Have you got time to answer 3 questions? And Sylvia, the lady on reception, Sylvia said that she had. So question number 1 was, who is the Queen of England? And Sylvia knew who the Queen of England was. Question number 2 was, who is the President of the United States? And Sylvia knew who the President of the United States was. Question number 3 was, what accountancy software do you use? Now, Sylvia hadn't got a clue. So she said, can I put you on hold? And the person said, yes, you can. So puts them on hold and phones their IT manager. Their IT manager is called Mike. He's a really good guy. We've worked with him for, I don't know, probably 12 years or so. And in fact, Mike and Sylvia were going out for lunch together that day, really good friends. Sylvia said, Mike, quick question. What accountancy software do we use? And Mike said, we use Sage Line 50. And she said, brilliant, see you at lunchtime. She goes back to the phone and says, we use Sage Line 50. And the guy on the end of the phone said, that's fantastic. You've answered 3 questions. You've won a magnum of champagne. Let me take your details. Now, it won't surprise you to hear that Sylvia never received a magnum of champagne. However, 3 days later, a call came in asking to speak to IT. So the call gets put through to Mike. Mike answers the phone. And the person on the end of the phone said, good afternoon, sir. Sorry to disturb you. This is Sage Technical Support. And we can see on our system that you use our Line 50 product. Unfortunately, the version of Line 50 that you're using, we've discovered a security vulnerability, and therefore we're urgently calling all of our users this afternoon to tell them what they need to do to protect themselves and protect their systems. And Mike said, oh my goodness, what does that mean? And they said, don't worry, we've caught it. We're about to email you a fix. It's a really neat fix. You just need to run it on 1 machine. You don't even need to get the users out of the system. So a few minutes later, Mike received an email that looked like it was from Sage. Of course, it wasn't, with an attachment, which he ran, and it was a ransomware attack. And within minutes, all of the computers throughout this organization went dark. They were all ransomed, and the opening bid was they wanted $36,000 payable in Bitcoin in order to unlock their computers. Really clever, joined up social engineering example of phishing and voice solicitation. And look, these attacks usually have some general red flags that you can look out for. There's always a sense of urgency with severe ramifications if you don't do what you've been asked to do. There's often name dropping. You know, they've done some research and it's like, well, yes, you know, I spoke to John and he's asked me to call you. And the thing is, what they're good at doing, what social engineers are good at doing, is making sure that they've answered enough subconscious questions so that you don't doubt them. So the fact that it was Sage calling, and the fact that they knew that he used line 50, he wasn't doubting it. You know, in the same way that, you know, the impersonation piece, if you see someone physically, if they're dressed as a police officer, you think they are a police officer. There's unconscious, whereas if there was just a person in plain clothes stood in the middle of the road trying to direct traffic, they don't get the same respect as a police officer. The thing is, unfortunately, a big part of the answer is for us not to be so trusting. We need to be more skeptical. And this goes against much of our human nature. But we must verify requests. You know, we've got to be more cynical. And it's easy in the cold light of day. It's easy for me to sit here and think, in that scenario with Mike, if that was me, I would have been calling Sage. I wouldn't just accept a phone call in and trust that it was them. Or I would have been Googling to see had anybody else got the fix, and had they loaded it, and had it caused any other problems, and so on and so forth. That's easy in the cold light of day. And maybe 9 times out of 10, Mike would have done the same thing. But on that particular day, he was tricked. And it doesn't matter how good he is, and it doesn't matter that he's a really good IT person. He's human, and it's the human firewall. But we have to check, we have to verify, and never rely on contact information provided by the requester either. Because look, this will happen to you in one form or another. This will happen to you. We're all being attacked all of the time. And don't think that this isn't happening to you, either at work or at home, because it is. And I love this quote from James Snook, who was the Deputy Director in the Cabinet Office in the UK. It's an old quote now, but I still use it because I think it's spot on. And he said, my message for companies that think they haven't been attacked is simply that you're not looking hard enough. Your business is constantly being attacked. And one of the things that we can do to check where we've been compromised, and please don't do it right now because I will lose you. We will send you the slides after today, so the references will be in here. But one of the things you can do is you can go to this website called haveibeenpwned.com. Now, pwned, slightly strange word, is used extensively in the cyber world, and it actually comes from gaming in the 1980s, from one of the original computer games. And the programmer had intended that if the computer won, if the computer beat the user, it was supposed to say, "I've owned you." Now, O's next to P on the keyboard, certainly on a QWERTY keyboard, and he mistyped, and what it came up and said was, if the computer won, it says, "I've pwned you." Now, that has stuck ever since. And if you are scammed, if you are tricked, then it's called pwning. Have I Been Pwned was created by the head of cybersecurity for Microsoft at the time, a guy called Troy Hunt. And he did it when Adobe had their breach. Adobe were the first company to have a large scale breach that we know of. And all Adobe users, or certainly a vast proportion of them, had their usernames, their passwords, and their password reset clues stolen. So Microsoft put up this site. You could go to it and you could put in your email address, and it would tell you whether you were part of the Adobe scam. Now, this has changed in the last couple of weeks, and actually sovereign people in the audience today might notice, the observant ones might notice a change to when I talked about this last time. because previously you put in your email address. And in the last couple of weeks, they've changed it so that you can put in your email address or your mobile phone number. And the reason they've made the change is a few weeks ago now, Facebook was breached and they stole the user information of 500 million Facebook users. Now, on Facebook, there's two ways of logging into Facebook, either with an email address or with a phone number. So Have I Been Pwned has just been updated so that you can also put in your phone number. And the way this works is you go to the website and you put in your email address, and it will tell you every data breach that you've been a part of. And chances are you have been a part of data breaches. There are so many household name companies that have had breaches. And this isn't anything that you've done wrong. This is them that have been breached. But it's really important that we know. The other thing that you can see at the top of the screen here, next to home, you can see there's a button that says notify me. If you go to Have I Been Pwned and click on notify me and put in your email address, then if your email address is ever involved in a breach in the future, they will tell you about it. Now, what's significant about this? There's two things. One, you should use it. Okay, you should go and you should check and check all your email addresses. Check your work email address and your home email address and so on, and do it for your family, because you want to know what breaches you've been a part of. And then you need to make sure that you're not using the passwords that you were using on those sites anymore or anywhere else. But there's another thing to consider here. So this website was created by Microsoft for you and I as end users to help us. The thing is, cyber criminals also use this service. So let's say I'm a cyber criminal and I've decided that I'm going to attack Tiffany. And I've got Tiffany's email address. So I go to Have I Been Pwned, and I put in Tiffany's email address, and I can see that she's been a part of 7 breaches. What I can then do is go onto the dark web and I can buy those data breaches. All of this data is for sale, unfortunately. And I'll show you here. So I went onto the dark web, and look, anyone can go onto the dark web. It's a part of the website. You need a specific web browser. You need to be using a web browser called Tor, which stands for the Onion Router. And but anyone can use it, and anyone can download it. And Tor was created by US military, and it was created so that they could use the internet in regions where the internet is controlled and when they're on operations. And they, in their wisdom, released it for general use. The thing about the dark web is nothing that happens on it can be traced. And every dark web website ends with .onion. And the concept is onions have layers and layers and layers of epidermis. And so it is with this. It's impossible to trace. This particular website on the dark web, it's like a cross between Amazon and eBay. This guy here is selling the data, all of the data of the top 415 breaches, and he's selling it for $2,000. That's not a lot of money. And you can literally buy anything you want, and you see listed 100,000 credit cards. And that's interesting as well, because a lot of people think that when their credit card details are stolen, and if they're stolen online, a lot of people expect that their credit card is then going to be maxed out. And that's not what we see typically. It's far more likely that your credit card is maxed out if your physical credit card is stolen. With digital stuff, where it's for sale on the dark web, if that were to happen, the market would dry up very quickly, because someone would buy a credit card, sell the details once, and then that's it, because the card's maxed. What actually happens more often than not is someone will go on and they'll buy 100,000 credit cards, and then they'll charge each of them $2. Now the question is, if you got your credit card statement today and there was an item on there for $2 or €2 or whatever your currency is, firstly, would you notice it? It's a small amount of money. Would you notice it? And secondly, if you did notice it, would you do anything about it? Now, most people wouldn't notice it. Most people don't go through their credit card statement line by line. Those that do, more often than not, if it was only $2, they probably wouldn't go to all the faff of reporting it and questioning it. And this is what the cyber criminals are banking on, because they've just charged 100,000 people $2. And they're going to do exactly the same next month and the month after that. What you must do when you look at have I been pwned is make sure that you have really looked at each of those breaches and gone in and changed your username, changed your password. And the other thing is, people open up accounts on products and then they stop using them, and all they do is they delete them. They delete the app off their computer or off their phone. And very few people go in and close the account first. And you must, because otherwise it's still open and open for abuse. But it does raise the question, how good are you with your passwords? Because if I'm the cyber criminal trying to attack Tiffany and there's 7 breaches, what I'm hoping is that when I buy the data for those 7 breaches, what I'm hoping is when I find Tiffany in each of those, that there's a pattern to her passwords. Or ideally, that she uses the same password on more than one site. Now, I know Tiffany wouldn't do that, but lots of people do. Passwords need to be unique. You need one password for each site, and passwords need to be complex. Not only that, wherever you can, please turn on multi-factor authentication or 2-factor authentication. It's built into so much of what we use now. At the beginning of the year, Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, he was breached, and the press originally reported it as being a WhatsApp breach, but it wasn't. They used WhatsApp, but the reality is somehow they had found his username and password for WhatsApp. WhatsApp has an option in account settings to turn on 2-factor authentication, and Jeff Bezos hadn't done that. If he had, the fact that the criminals had got his username and password wouldn't have mattered unless they also had his mobile phone in their hands and it was unlocked. And so many of the apps that we use support 2-factor authentication, but they don't enforce it. And I implore you to go into each app, go into the account settings of what you use, on LinkedIn and Twitter and WhatsApp and, stuff like banking. It is enforced for obvious reasons, but turn it on wherever you can. And this website here on the screen, 2fa.directory, is a great list of, it looks at the apps that you're using and tells you whether they support 2-factor or multi-factor authentication and how to turn it on. And in terms of, there's an obvious question. If you've got to have a unique complex password for every site that you use and every system that you use, how on earth do you remember them? The answer is a good, specifically designed password manager. Personally, I use LastPass. Other password managers are also available. Dashlane and 1Pass and so on. There's lots of really good ones. I use LastPass. In the UK, GCHQ have a CyberSecurity department called the National Cybersecurity Centre, they also tell people use a password manager. What you mustn't do is let your web browser remember your passwords. Don't let your phone remember your passwords, because there's been way too many cases of, you know, Chrome being breached, for example. The frustrating thing is every single web browser that's on the market offers to remember your passwords, but it's not safe. So please don't do that. I talked about phishing earlier. Many of us will be aware of phishing, and phishing is a big problem. And phishing is a scam that comes via email. It's an attempt to obtain information via email. And we've all received phishing. You know, phishing's been around for a very long time. You know, the Nigerian prince trying to get money out of the country has been around for decades. It used to come in the post, and then it used to come by fax, and now it comes by email, and yet still people fall for it every single month. There's two trains of thought, actually. Some people will say, gosh, that email is so obviously phishing. You know, look at the spelling mistakes, look at the inappropriate use of caps lock and that kind of thing. There's a theory that is completely intentional. And phishing emails fall into two camps today. They fall into the camp of being extremely sophisticated and people saying, gosh, that was hard to spot. You know, in the old days, they all used to be really poorly written. The other half are still really poorly written, but they're really poorly written on purpose. And the theory is that if you receive one of those poorly written, poorly crafted emails, you're an intelligent person and you're going to spot it and you're going to delete it. However, a vast proportion of the population isn't as intelligent as you are, and they don't notice the spelling mistakes. And actually the cyber criminals want those people because they're not as intelligent as you, and therefore they're easier to scam. The other type of phishing, which is a real problem in business, is whaling. Now, whaling is a phishing attack aimed at the big fish in the organization. It's sometimes called CEO crime. And this typically plays out as an email from the CEO to the accounts team saying, I need you to make this payment urgently. Here are the bank details. To give you an illustration, in the UK, there is a successful whaling attack every 15 minutes of every working day. And by success, I mean money paid out by a business into a criminal's bank account. And, you know, it's crazy, but people aren't talking about it enough. Another problem, and I'm going to talk about this from two perspectives, actually. I'm going to talk about this from a corporate perspective and also a personal perspective. So another form of phishing that is a big problem in business is what we call a man-in-the-middle attack. And the way this works, email inherently is not secure. And the way a man-in-the-middle attack works is I send you imagine the scenario. You booked me to do cybersecurity training for your staff. And you've asked me for a quote. I've given you a quote. You've accepted it. You've sent me your purchase order reference and so on. So I'm set up as a supplier on your system. I deliver the work, I do the training, and at the end of it, my accounts department send your accounts department an email with the invoice attached. The way a man-in-the-middle attack works is that email with the invoice is intercepted en route and it's edited. And very common form of attack, they edit the invoice and they write across the invoice, type across the invoice, please note our new bank details. And then they forward the email on its journey. So your accounts team receive the email that they were expecting from my accounts team, and everything ties up. But across the invoice, it says, please note our new bank details. How many of your accounts teams actually check and verify that? I was doing a talk for another business, and it was interesting because they said, well, 6 months ago, we changed our bank, our corporate bank. So for the last 6 months, every invoice that we've sent out has got a line across it exactly as you've just described. So I said, well, out of interest, how many of your customers have contacted you to verify it? And they said less than 5, definitely less than 5. People aren't checking. Another example of man in the middle from a social perspective. This happened to a friend of mine. He called me up one day and said, Rob, I don't know whether you can help my wife. She's been scammed. And the way this had worked, she had organised a girls' weekend away for her and her friends, and they were going to a spa for a long weekend. She'd organised it and she'd paid for it all, and she'd had a chat with her friends and said, look, it's all sorted. I'm going to send you an email with all the details, plus what you owe me and my bank details. When you get it, if you could pay me, that would be fantastic. So she emailed all of her friends. They got their email a few minutes later, but the email had been intercepted. She was victim of man in the middle, and the email had been edited and the bank details in the email had been changed. So all of her friends received the email. They all paid her immediately, except they weren't paying her, they were paying the cyber criminal. And the lesson here is that we must always, always, always verify email instructions. Nobody should ever make a payment based on an email. Never. And that message has got to be received loud and clear in your workplaces. Nobody should make a payment based on an email. It's got to be verified. You know, and what her friends could have done, and what we need to do, is they receive that email. You've either got to pick up the phone and say, can I just read your bank details back to you just to make doubly sure? Or send a message using a different format. So send a WhatsApp message and say, right, these are the bank details. Can you just confirm before you make the payment? The fourth vector is smishing. And smishing is phishing by SMS message or text message. And these are just almost out of control at the moment. There's a lot in the UK press calling for the mobile phone providers to do something about it, and they're saying that they can't. You know, when I was creating the slide deck for this, it was a Saturday, and 3 of us in my house received smishing messages. My daughter's just got her first mobile phone, and she came to me and she said, I've got this message from Amazon about my delivery. And I said, you haven't got an Amazon account? And she said, no, I know, I thought it was odd. I got one from a mobile phone provider. Now, it wasn't my phone provider, but it was very, very good. And had it been my phone provider, you know, the message said, there's a problem with this month's payment. We need you to log into your account and re-verify your payment instructions. Now, I don't have a personal mobile phone. I have a corporate mobile phone, and the business pays for it. So, and I didn't use that mobile phone provider, but I did look at it and thought, this is very good. And do you know what? What if my dad had received this message? You know, would he have clicked on the link and updated his payment information? So be aware of smishing. There's been a lot of smishing as well around COVID vaccinations and fake vaccinations. We had a big problem here in the UK with people needing to make a payment in order to get their vaccination. And of course, the vaccinations are free. So it's just being aware. And indeed, COVID has caused a lot of problems. There's been a lot of different forms of attack. There's one doing the rounds at the moment, which uses an infected Excel spreadsheet, and essentially it's a spoofed email, supposedly from one director to another director in the organization, and it's accidentally CC'd to the all staff at email address. And so you imagine all your staff tomorrow morning open up their email, and there's an email from you to one of your co-directors, supposedly, and it says, ahead of our board meeting on Friday, I attach an Excel spreadsheet, and it details all the COVID job layoffs, all the redundancies. And all your staff get that, and they think, oh my goodness, I didn't know I was at risk of losing my job. Now, it only takes one person in your business to open that Excel spreadsheet, and you've got a ransomware attack. And this particular attack, this particular scam, has been around a while. The first time I saw it was when they first announced Brexit, but we see it in the summer in terms of holidays. We got a rush of it in November. And in November, the version of it was ahead of our board meeting on Friday. I attached an Excel spreadsheet showing all the proposed staff Christmas bonuses. And people think, I didn't know I was getting a bonus. Very, very clever, but people need to be aware and people need to think about it. Make sure that you are using good antivirus. And when I say good, as a rule of thumb, you can tell it's good if you're paying for it, and it's a recognized virus company. There are free antivirus products on the market. My view is you get what you pay for. And if you use an Apple computer, you also need antivirus on that. There are way too many Apple users who don't think they need antivirus, and Apple viruses are just going mad in the wild. When it comes to phones, that's an interesting one. So if you use an Apple phone, an iPhone or an iPad, you don't need antivirus on those. There aren't any viruses currently that can attack an iPhone. That doesn't mean you can't be scammed or spoofed on an iPhone, but you don't need antivirus. If, however, you use an Android phone, you've absolutely got to get antivirus on that, because Android viruses are, again, a big problem. Be aware of USB keys. There's a lot of cyber attacks that use USB keys to do the attack. They will get USB keys into your office. They will post them to you. They will drop them randomly. They will buy a brand new USB key in a plastic clamshell packaging, open the packaging, infect the USB key, stick it back in the packaging, and then drop that in the car park. So you're walking across the car park and you think, oh, someone's dropped a brand new USB key, I'll have that. Or the other one, which is favoured by cyber criminals, is they will put together a bunch of keys, and on the key ring they'll put a USB key just like the one you can see on the screen. Now the question is, if you were walking into the office and you saw a bunch of keys lying on the floor, what would you do? And most people would pick them up in order to try and return them to the rightful owner. There's no way of identifying the keys, but there is a USB key on the key ring. And of course, what the criminals hoping you will do is stick that USB into your computer, and it only takes one person to do it. And again, you've got a ransomware attack. So be very, very wary of USB keys. Make sure you always do software updates. Software updates are critical, and they come out all the time. If you take Microsoft as an example, Microsoft do security updates once a month. They call it Update Tuesday, and on average, there's about 50 issues that they've found. Some of those will be bugs. Some of them will be, criminals have found a new way of attacking. So Microsoft have built in a new technology to stop that form of attack. But it's really important that you do it. A couple of years ago in the UK, we had what was reported in the press to be the Nhs Cyber Attack. Now, the NHS is our health service, and it runs all of our hospitals. 75% of hospitals in the UK had to shut for 2 days because they couldn't operate in both senses of the word. And it was because of this cyber attack. Now, as I say, it was reported in the press as being an NHS cyber attack. It wasn't. It was a worldwide cyber attack called WannaCry, and it actually came out of North Korea. The thing is, WannaCry was attacking a vulnerability in Microsoft Windows. But Microsoft Windows knew about it, and they'd fixed it. And they'd fixed it 4 years prior to the hospital attack. But 75% of the hospitals in this country had never loaded a single update, even though they come out every month free of charge. So software updates are vitally important, because if they'd loaded just one of them, then they wouldn't have been able to have been attacked. Be aware too of where you use your mobile phone. There's so much computing power in your pocket. In fact, a lot of people spend more on their mobile phone than they do on their computers. There's lots of people with, more expensive iPhones than the laptop that they use, and they're being attacked all the time. So we do need to be aware where we use them. And one of your considerations is public Wi-Fi. Public Wi-Fi is a risk. There's a scam in the industry that we call the Starbucks scam. It's got nothing to do with Starbucks, but around the world, people know what Starbucks is. And it works like this. So you go into a coffee shop and you take out your mobile phone, your cell phone, and you look to see whether there's Wi-Fi available. And at the top of the list, there's a point that says Starbucks free Wi-Fi. So you connect to it. The thing is, Starbucks don't call their Wi-Fi Starbucks free Wi-Fi. Starbucks free Wi-Fi is a criminal who sat in the corner of the coffee shop broadcasting an access point. And when you connect to it, you've given that criminal access to your device. If you don't have to use public Wi-Fi, please don't. I use my data tariff. If you've got to use it, at least be questioning, be cynical. Ask a member of staff, is this the right Wi-Fi that I'm connecting to? And the other thing that you can do is use a VPN. So a VPN stands for Virtual Private Network. The thing is, a lot of people get VPNs wrong and think, well, because I've got a VPN, I'm secure. Well, a VPN is actually about privacy. It's part of the security jigsaw, but it's about privacy. Now, a VPN will stop a man-in-the-middle attack often, but it doesn't protect you against the Starbucks scam because you've already connected to that criminal. But a VPN is also good if you need to access a system that only works in a specific country, because you can tell it what country you want to present as. So if I've got a system that only works in the UK and I'm on holiday in Dubai, I can tell it that I'm in the UK and it allows me to still use my system. Big sanity check question. If we finish this session today and you click on a link that you shouldn't have clicked on and it's a ransom attack and it all goes wrong, do you know what you'd do? Do your staff, if it was them, if they'd clicked on it, did they know what they'd do? And it's essential that they do, because panic and or time delay costs money. And the answer is, you've got to have a cyber incident response plan. And I think of this a bit like, when you stop in a hotel, on the back of the bedroom door, there's always a sticker that says, in case of fire, this is what you need to do. That's what your cyber response plan is. If you have got one, has everyone got a copy? Have you tested it? Is it appropriate? Do people understand it? Because look, we're never going to get there with cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is an ongoing journey. As soon as an industry we come up with new ways of defense, so the criminals come up with new ways of attack. So you've got to train people, you've got to stay on your guard, you've got to make sure that you're updating your awareness on a regular basis. Now, to that end, every week I send out an email on a Friday morning, my time, of the latest scams and the latest things that have happened this week. If you would like to receive that email, you're very, very welcome to it. There's no cost for the service. Just go to ramsack.com/cybernews, put in your email address, and you will get that email. Now, just a GDPR statement from me: if you put your email address in on that web page, it won't go anywhere else. It doesn't go onto our database. You will never get anything else from us, and it won't be shared in any way. You will simply get that newsletter on a Friday morning. You're going to get the slides. The slides have got my contact details in them. If there's anything, we're going to do questions now, but if there's anything that you think of after the event today or in the future that you would like to ask me about any of the content we've discussed or anything to do with cybersecurity, please feel free to contact me, and I will do all I can to help and assist you.
Right, questions. Rob, thank you very much for that. Yeah, I've heard you speak a few times now, so you obviously did the training for the group, and I was privileged to sit on the earlier trainings as well as the full one for all the staff. But I'm always just fascinated, but equally terrified at just how smart these people are, how it just continues to evolve, and you've really just got to keep your finger on the pulse. We've got a few questions that have come in. I was wondering, actually, maybe start just going back to last part. So I guess one of the main things we really need, one of the first steps we can all take, is really making sure that those passwords are protected and that they are all different, as you say, and they are complex passwords. I was wondering if maybe you could go into a little bit more into LastPass. I remember you talking about it before, and I had a quick look into it, and I saw that there was kind of like a business version as well as a personal version. So one where you keep all your personal passwords, and what I was looking at was also the one for business, whereby, you know, if you're a team of people that need access to platforms, say for me, from a sort of a marketing standpoint, we have a whole team across all of our different platforms with lots of different passwords. That's something that you can kind of put in and use, and then it protects everybody should people move on. Can you just explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two things. So the way LastPass works, and others are similar in their approach, is you start off by creating a passphrase. So a passphrase is a short sentence, and this is your login. It's something about you, about your life, your interests, or whatever. So when I open up LastPass, it asks me for my passphrase. Now, the longer a password is, a passphrase would take years for a supercomputer to crack. So you put in your passphrase, and then when you go to use a site, it says, okay, firstly enter your current password, and then it says, right, I'm going to change that for you, and it changes it to a complex password. That's it in essence how it works. Now, as you say, there's two things. There's the personal mode, but there's also a corporate mode. And I think many businesses get passwords wrong. So if you've got any form of shared passwords, so the example you just gave, Tiffany, was in terms of let's say your marketing team are using a platform. So it could be GoToWebinar. There could be several people in the organization who have got the username and password for Sovereign's GoToWebinar account. And that's fairly normal. The trouble is, if you have a leaver exiting your business and you've got any form of shared passwords, your leaver policy then needs to trigger a change of passwords. And most businesses don't do that. It's too cumbersome. What I love about LastPass in the enterprise version is you simply create groups. So the administrator would create an entity called GoToWebinar, and they would put in the username and the password, and then they would say, right, all of these people within Sovereign have got access to GoToWebinar. And when you go in, you would put in your passphrase, and because you've been added to the GoToWebinar icon, you would see it and you'd be able to log on. You would never need to know what the username and password is. And the beauty of that is, on the day that you leave Sovereign, I simply remove you as a user, and you've no longer got access to any of the passwords that you had before. So I really like that. There's a family version as well, which is only, I think, $1 a month more, but that lets you give all, your children and so on password protection too, and share access if you want to.
Yeah, excellent. And I guess we've got a question that's coming in here that probably also leads on to that. Would you recommend using complex passwords created by the website when signing up?
Well, in theory, yes. The trouble is, when the website says, do you want me to create this complex password? Normally that is linked to the website also remembering that password. And the problem with that is websites can be breached. So what I would do rather than that, if you're using LastPass, other password managers are also available. I'm not selling this product, this is just what I use. But what happens for me when I go to create a new password, in the password field, I simply right click, and one of the options is let LastPass generate a complex password, and it does it that way.
Yeah, okay. Right, we've got quite a few questions. What should we know about cookies and allowing these?
So cookie, there's a lot of discussion about this at the moment. Cookies have been mislabeled, really. When you think of cookies, there's quite a nice connotation to cookies. Whereas actually a cookie is a tracker. That's what it is. So, but if you got a message on a website that says, will you allow me to install my trackers? People would say no, but they don't. That's not the word that's used. The word is, will you allow me to install my cookies? And people say, yeah. Now, just think of that. Every time you see that message about cookies, just rename it to trackers and then see how you feel.
Right. And then we've got one here. Actually, I can probably add to this too. May opening an email attachment in preview without downloading it also be dangerous? And I think maybe also further to that, to going back to the phishing, are there any points that you can sort of maybe give sort of key points in terms of how to identify a phishing email?
Yeah, okay. So previewing an email in itself isn't dangerous, because you're not clicking on anything. What they're wanting you to do in a phishing email is click on a link or open an attachment, and it's really clever. Look, social engineers, if they're wanting to attack you, they will do research on you. They will scope you out. They will look at your social media, and if I'm a social engineer and I'm wanting to attack Tiffany, and I look at her Facebook and I see that actually Tiffany's big into running marathons, and she's always posting selfies of her running the last marathon and so on. Well, actually, I could use that, and I could find the last run that, in fact, I'm using this as an example because I know it's been done. So I find the last marathon that Tiffany did, and I send an email tending to be from that marathon organizer. And I said, Tiffany, thanks ever so much for running in our marathon. We took some photos, and obviously they're taking photos all the time. We've got some photos of you during the race that we would love to use in our promotional material. Please, can you click here to view them and give us authorization. Now you've just done that marathon and you think, oh yeah, they want to feature me in their thing. Very, very clever. You've got to look at what the links are. If you hover over a link, it will tell you what it is. And often when you hover over it, you see that it's got a really weird website name, or maybe a weird country. Just be aware of that.
Yeah, thanks. We're pretty much at time, so maybe if I can combine two questions here that are kind of related, and then we can end on that. We've got here, how do we know the level of security that I've been pwned site is secure, and what if it gets hacked? And then just further to that, we've had another question that's come in about, say, an app like LastPass that creates passwords, and if that's maliciously targeted and therefore inherently dangerous to use as well.
Yeah, okay. Well, bonus marks to whoever's asked the question, because I did implore everybody to be cynical and to push back, so that's great. Look, have I been pwned is, it can't, have I been pwned can't be hacked, or if it is hacked, actually to what end? All it's doing is it's reporting stuff that's on the dark web. So for every data breach, it's just looking at it and it's saying, look, if you put in your email address, it's actually doing a free of charge service for you by doing a dark web search to find out where do you appear. I fully endorse and recommend Have I Been Pwned. It's completely safe. If it was breached, as I say, I don't know what that would achieve. In terms of the password manager being breached, that's kind of a different subject, and is a very sensible question, because of course you're putting all of your eggs in one basket. You know, LastPass, which is what I use, has all of my passwords, and LastPass will be attacked. It's been attacked in the past, and it will be. My view is, look, LastPass is created by a security company. It's a security company called LogMeIn, and they've got over 900 people working specifically on that product. If they have an attack, they're going to be all over it. You know, I run a cybersecurity business. I've got 75 people working for me. If I'm attacked, I'm probably in a better position to respond than many of you. But it's still LastPass that I rely on personally to manage my passwords.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks. Well, we've just hit time. Thank you very much, Rob, very much. That's always just such an exciting sort of conversation. And thank you everyone for also attending. The recording is going to be sent around. It will have also Rob's details, and his email is there on the slide. So if you've got any questions, and we've also got a copy of all the questions, so I'll pass those on to Rob, and he can also get back to you. So I think we're going to end on that, and thank you very much for attending. Take care. Thanks a lot, Rob.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.